Well, good morning. Good morning. It's good to see everyone. We are so very glad to have you here in Orlando, Florida. Thank you so much for being here. On behalf of Penwell, welcome to PowerGen International 2013. In case you didn't know, this is the largest gathering of power professionals in the world. We're expecting more than 21,000 people to walk through those convention center doors this week. There's going to be a lot to see and experience here over the next few days. On the exhibit floor, there are more than 1,400 companies who will be showcasing their latest innovations and services. And then there is the conference itself. At PowerGen alone, more than 200 speakers, experts from throughout the world, will be sharing their information and experiences in 42 conference sessions, including 3 mega sessions. This is a large event with a wealth of opportunities to generate new business and gather new information. But this didn't happen overnight. It took 25 years to get to where we are today. This industry has been coming together here at PowerGen for 25 years now. Clearly, there was a void that needed to be filled. The industry needed a place where they could collaborate, consult, and connect with others facing the same challenges and goals. The industry's best and brightest stepped up to join Penwell to meet this need. And at that first show in 1988, which was held right here in Orlando, we had 147 exhibitors and 2,500 attendees. Today, as I mentioned, more than 20,000 people will walk through those doors, and they will be greeted by more than 1,400 exhibitors. That kind of growth doesn't happen in a casual way. That kind of success comes from devotion. It comes from commitment, and it comes from a passion for a cause. And that commitment and that passion came from a variety of places. It came from the program committee, who represents the best and brightest this industry has to offer. It came from the power producers this event is meant to serve. It came from the vendors who bring solutions to the table. And it came from the organizers who work year-round to make this a meaningful event for power professionals worldwide. So to commemorate PowerGen's 25th anniversary, we've prepared a video that features many of the people who have made this event what it is today. Let's take a look.
PowerGen International is the place where you meet all your customers.
So it's a great networking event for my client and also a great opportunity for everyone involved.
The experience has been absolutely wonderful. The networking opportunities are incredible.
Learn about different aspects of the industry as well.
It's meant a lot. It's got our name and our brand out there for many years, and it's certainly helped us in the power industry.
I think they set a new trend, opened up new avenues, which has been the experience I've thoroughly enjoyed.
And we believe in it. It's a great thing for the industry.
I wish you another 25 years in the future.
Congratulations for 25 years of excellent running of a convention.
I'd like to congratulate Penwell and PowerGen for just the tremendous job you do.
And we wish them continued success.
Happy anniversary, PowerGen, for your 25th year.
Great show, great event. Happy 25th anniversary. Thank you, Penwell.
Congratulations, PowerGen International!
I think now would be a good time to recognize the committee members of PowerGen, Nuclear Power International, the Renewable Energy World Conference and Expo, and the PowerGen Financial Forum. That is a mouthful. If you add it all up, more than 130 people serve on these committees, and they have been working year-round recruiting speakers and refining the content for all four of these great conferences. So at this time, I'd like to ask the committee members who are here with us today to please stand. Committee members with PowerGen, NPI, REW, and the Financial Forum. I want to thank you for your devotion to all four of these great conferences and to this great industry. Thank you. In another way to commemorate PowerGen's 25th anniversary, we wanted to find out exactly who has had the biggest influence on this industry over the last 25 years. So we put together a list and asked the industry who they thought was the most influential person. We will tell you who they selected later on in today's keynote session, so stay tuned for that. We all have cell phones, and many of us use apps for a variety of purposes. Well, we have developed a mobile app for PowerGen International. This free app is a very handy tool. It's full of useful information that can help you find your way around the exhibit floor this week. With this app, you can find a list of exhibitors, you can look at the floor plan, and you can pull up a list of all our conference sessions. All you have to do is search for Power Engineering Magazine and then download the app at no cost. Once you do that, then you'll hit the Events tab in the upper right-hand corner to see all of this information that I just mentioned. Well, we've got a great conference program planned for you this week, including all four conferences. We have more than 70 conference sessions, which will feature more than 300 speakers, experts from throughout the world. The topics range from air quality control issues to the latest innovations in combined cycle gas turbine technology. This, without question, will be the most comprehensive examination of the issues, the trends, and the challenges facing the global power market today. And as you know, those challenges are many. Overcoming these challenges will require massive investments in new technology. It will require power producers to rethink their strategies for producing and delivering power. It will require more flexible generation. It will require more conversions of coal plants to gas plants. And it will require a complicated integration of emission controls. These changes will be wrenching for the industry, but the industry is responding. Some would say it is being forced to respond. Many of the changes I just mentioned are driven by new regulation, low gas prices, and a public demand for cleaner energy. Perhaps the biggest game changer is the EPA's proposal to control CO2. It would be the first ever limit on greenhouse gas emissions from U.S. power plants. The problem is the standard set by the EPA, 1,100 pounds per megawatt hour, doesn't give coal a fighting chance. The standard can't be met without capturing and storing the carbon. And that technology, by most accounts, is risky and unproven. This rule has been described by some as a death penalty for coal. It would essentially eliminate coal as an option for new generation. And as a result, we may never again see plants like John Turk in Arkansas or the Edwardsport project in Indiana. We were hoping for a practical standard that would keep coal in the mix, but that wasn't the case. And as prospects for new nuclear construction dim, utilities are really left with one option for baseload capacity, and that's natural gas, and that's great. Combined cycle gas turbine technology is faster, it's more flexible, and it's more practical. Practical because it can accommodate the variability of solar and wind power, which continue to grow amid state standards for renewable energy. But many of today's gas plants were built to serve as peaking facilities. They weren't designed to provide baseload generation. Suddenly, these plants are running longer and harder than ever before. And so this increasing reliance on natural gas is creating a whole other set of issues and problems for the people who maintain, manage, and operate gas-fired generation. To keep these plants flexible and efficient, power plant managers need better maintenance programs and strategies. On top of all this, the industry is facing major investments to comply with new rules for storing and managing coal ash. It's facing stricter discharge limits for effluent. And after decades of debate, we may soon be required to modify water intake structures to comply with Section 316B of the Clean Water Act. To deal with these and other issues, the industry is looking for cost-effective solutions. That's why events like this have never been more relevant. Many of these issues and solutions will be featured this week here at PowerGen. And so I think your investment in time and in money will be well worth it. My hope for you this week is this. We want you to leave Orlando inspired and reinvigorated. We want you to leave here armed with fresh ideas and hopeful about the future of this great industry. So again, thank you for being here. We have recruited an outstanding keynote panel. Our keynote speakers will touch on many of the issues I just mentioned. So let's go ahead and meet our first keynote speaker. Peter Delaney is the chairman, president, and CEO of OGE Corporation. OGE is the parent company of Oklahoma City-based Oklahoma Gas and Electric. OG&E provides power to more than 800,000 customers in Oklahoma and Arkansas and has nearly 7,000 megawatts of generation capacity. OGE is also a 50% general partner of Enogex, a large natural gas midstream partnership. Before joining OGE, Mr. Delaney spent 15 years in investment banking on Wall Street. He specialized in corporate finance and other advisory services to electric utilities in the U.S., Europe, and South America. Mr. Delaney earned his bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Virginia. He received a master's degree in business administration from Tulane University. Everyone, please help me welcome Peter Delaney. Thank you, Pete.
Morning, everyone. It's great to be here for the 25th anniversary of PowerGen. I must say, however, when I got the call and asked to come speak with you today, I was a little bit surprised by that, a little bit confused, which is unusual for me. But because in 2007, as a company, we came out and announced that, in fact, our strategy was not to build any new generation until after the year 2020 in terms of increasing our generating capacity. In fact, we were going to rely on demand response and other ways to wring efficiency out of our system. So I think you'd want to have somebody here that would build some of the newest technology and incorporating that in terms of the generating side into their operations, but that's not me. And so, when I stuck my head up, I looked around, I didn't see a lot of other people building power plants either, so then I started to understand maybe why I'm here. And maybe you'll see from my comments, understand a little bit maybe why we're not out building as quickly as maybe some think we should. There's two parts to my comments this morning. The first is how are we thinking about dealing with our portfolio in the face of our intermediate term compliance issues that we have, and overall, on longer term, how are we thinking overall about the business. And I got to say, on both counts, whether it's intermediate term or long term, we need to rethink our strategies and approaches. Now, each of us are going to have different views of the world depending on what portfolio we have and what kind of cards we hold. So just want to be clear that we're a vertically integrated utility. We have about 40% of our generation is unscrubbed coal. We own and buy about 10% of wind on an energy basis, and the rest of our fleet is natural gas. No, we do not have any merchant generation, which I'm actually happy about. I generally don't use slides, and so hopefully in the back you probably won't be able to read them, so they're not that important, but if hopefully I won't forget to advance them as we go along. I want to just start talking about borrowing a term that the financial markets use, which is the VIX index, which is the volatility of index. That is also called the fear index. I don't know if we all look at it the same way, but it has to do with the uncertainty that we're looking today, and are we at a high point in terms of that uncertainty? And of course, volatility and variability is not inherently good or bad. It just depends on how you're positioned. And of course, rational players would tell you that in periods of great volatility, you like to be holding options. And so I may be abusing this point a little bit, this concept, but I want to think about in the intermediate term, how do we get optionality? I think from our standpoint, in times when you have these types of uncertainties, you'd like to sit it out. You don't want to make your make your investments and make your calls, but we really don't have any choice, right? We have to provide 24/7 reliable power for our customers. So we don't really have the option to sit it out. We have a large policy-driven investment agenda ahead of us. Of course, you're familiar with the increasing regulations every year, the challenges associated with cybersecurity and the increasing digitization of our businesses. That's increasing resources. We have the NERC regulations increasing. We have Power Pool going to day 2 in our case, requiring additional investment and costs. Of course, environmental, I think was mentioned by Russell. That's a big one for all of us in terms of investments, MATS. Regional haze in our case is a big one. And then, of course, there's CO2. And I'd put CO2 in a league of its own. I'm not sure what league, but it's a major league in terms of uncertainty for us. Renewables, again, driven a lot by, in some cases, subsidization by state and federal. We use it, like I said 10%, and it plays well in our portfolio. That's driving the need for, however, more investment in transmission because we need to integrate those facilities that aren't near our load centers. And so and then there's other market structural reforms requiring additional transmission investments. So we really can't sit it out. We need to make these investments. We have, in terms of regional haze, we have 55 months to comply with our 4 coal units. But of course, then we have aging infrastructure is nothing new. We're going to be dealing with that for years. We have been dealing with that for years. So we think we all hopefully understand that and get ahead of it. But of course, that's okay, because we're going to make this up on volume, right? We've got all these increasing costs, but we're going to be spread over more and more volumes as we grow our electricity sales. And of course, that's, when you discuss the load growth, you'd call it slow and slowing, is probably how to talk about that. In our case, what we're seeing is that we don't have any per capita usage growth. It's all of our growth is based on customer growth. And luckily, we have a strong economy driven by oil and gas. We have about a 4 or 5% unemployment rate. But we don't really expect, I'd rather rely on per capita usage, but not population growth, because that can change. But as you know, efficiency standards are going to continue to tighten. And I think we're on the right slide. And so we're challenged in that part because we'd like to have higher volumes, but we're not going to have the same type of growth that we've had. And we've been living in a low volume environment as well, so that's all right. We can manage that. We understand that as well. But there's something new, which is so your load growth is low, but gets to who's serving that load. And so that's the substitution risk that as we call it, and we think about it, which is the distributed energy resources. What is the risk to the fact that there may be load growth, but somebody else may be serving it? And that is a risk that is not a traditional risk, and one that we've had to deal with historically. There's the technology curve associated with how is technology going to bend the cost curve on distributed energy resources. That will, again, increasingly challenge us and become more competitive. So if you add that up, when we talk about uncertainty, I think there's significant uncertainty and a question, which is how long will the economic and business model for regulated utilities, electrics, going to continue to work for our customers and shareholders? Today, the last couple of days in Orlando, as well as the EEI Financial Conference, where all the CFOs and investors from around the world are. And the theme of that conference is seeking clarity in uncertain times. So I think that's the financial view and the investor's view as well. It's a common theme, and something that may not go away anytime soon. So we're clearly an industry in transition, or we better be in transition. And as we think about it, so during a transition period, perhaps the rules are a little bit different than in terms of investing and how we're approaching our business. Again, how do we purchase optionality in this period of time. So we're looking at shorter horizon in terms of recovery on our investments, if you want to call it shorter payback periods. So long-term bets we would try to stay away from and heavily discounted versus the alternatives of shorter planning horizon. Less capital-intensive alternatives perhaps are more attractive as we think about potentially 10 to 15 years down the road, legacy and stranded assets, something perhaps we haven't had to think about in the past. And optionality generally there's an issue there as well, because buying optionality doesn't usually align with least cost planning over a longer term. And that gets into what is the term? Is it 10 years? Is it 30 years? How comfortable are you projecting out load growth with all the factors I mentioned earlier? And if we're looking at 10 years, and we think that's what we're comfortable with, and the regulators are looking at 30 years, you can see there's a pretty big gap there. You'll get different answers, and that's going to leave a lot of room for discussion on what the real right time horizon is. Again, the challenges from our shareholder and our business model is that fixed investment is what we earn money on. And if in fact we are going to try to make our business less capital intensive, are we working against our shareholders? And of course, I think customers, and we need to do the best job for customers, and if you align with the customers, long term we'll look at, but there is that earnings issue that we run into. As I talked about staying away from capital intensive options, they tend to have higher operating costs. There are opportunities in this change. Of course, there are some additional value pools that are developing. You talked about distributed generation or distributed energy resources, including battery storage. You have electric vehicle infrastructure on the public side. Products and services for customers, premises. I think there's a lot of opportunity given the technology that's available today. And of course, how do we get value out of all the data? We have told our system is totally, we have 800,000 smart meters, so all of our customers are connected to us, and we can communicate them two ways and do send them price signals often. So we have a lot of opportunities, and opportunities versus threats. What's the difference? And to me, it's just the difference is readiness. Do you have strategies? Do you have plans? Do you have the capabilities to deal with these? And that's what turns an opportunity or a threat into an opportunity. So what are we doing? We talked about specifically our steps that we've taken recently on the regional haze. We had a state implementation plan that the EPA came in and put in their own federal implementation plan that we sued. We did win a stay, which bought us some time. Unfortunately, we recently lost that action, but it did buy us some time to get a closer look at how these other regulations on environmental were developing. Of course, not long enough to get us to look a little better look at the CO2 regulations, which we are very much concerned about. So optionality, again, by using DR to push out our generation needs. We're expecting to push out about 300 to 400 megawatt generation need we had in 16 out past 2020. Of course, if I could figure out a way to drive that out past 2020, we're going to do that. Reducing our fixed costs. Again, fixed costs are hard to deal with when you think of stranded costs, which in our business is labor. And we're down about 6% versus a year ago. We're going to drive costs out with our, again, data to value. We're spending a lot of time on that. We're reworking our processes, how we are working in the field, and that's having a great results in bringing down any backlogs we once had in terms of work. Our focus on investment then is closest to the customer. It tends to be, of course, shorter term, smaller bets, but all of our investments we look at how is it visible, making it visible to the customer, because they're very sensitive, of course, about increasing rates, and all these costs and compliance that we have are not helping that. So our investments have to either lower costs, improve reliability, improve power restoration, or improve power quality, and that's the screen we're trying to be disciplined on our capital. Also, the regulatory model, something we probably need to work, I call it into being an adaptive regulatory model, a regulatory model that works, again, for our customers and works financially for the company and the regulators under various scenarios going forward, because we do have really uncertainty about which scenario we're looking at. Maybe regulation incentivized productivity gains, which is very important to us and rewards the quality of service, that allows for recovery of our costs under a flat growth or even a declining growth scenario. a flexibility to be able to introduce products and services quickly and not having to go through rate filings. The market, as you know, moves very quickly now in terms of keeping up your customer segmentation and developing new products aimed at these customers change all the time, and you need to be able to get in the market quickly and not have to go through regular proceedings. And then there's the rates, and unbundling our rates perhaps, as we'll talk about how we view our distribution system. Unbundle the rates to be able to price out what our various services we're providing in terms of ancillary services, backup service, storage services, power quality, things of that nature, so that we can avoid or at least make transparent any subsidies and make smart decisions about if those subsidies are right from an economic, from an allocation of resources, and from a social basis. But overall, I want to step back from some of that tactical, short-term, buying optionality and trying to see our way through this and navigate through this uncertainty to talk about really what are we trying to accomplish. And that's where I just think about the relevancy of the grid, keeping our grid relevant. And I don't know about where you sit, but there's an awful lot of talk about going off the grid. You see it everywhere. It refers to, people camping talk about off the grid. They talk about, secret discussions off the grid. They really romanticize being off the grid. And that makes me nervous. I'd rather, there's a country western song about being off the grid. I'd like to have some songs about being on the grid, right? That's how I feel, because I get a little paranoid when I hear about all the stars up there talking about how great it is to get off the grid. So what I'm concerned about is the relevancy of the grid, right, going forward in 5, 10 years. If we keep driving up our costs, so what we got to do is we have to take out costs and increase the quality of our service. And of course, that normally doesn't go. You would think, well, that doesn't really go together, and that's discussions we have internally, but I think it's the challenge that we need to take on. And that's important to keep the relevancy of as I say, the relevancy of our grid. I talked at the beginning about our efficiency and not building new power plants, and a great example is our demand response, our Smart Hours program. And we have a program where you get communicating programmable thermostats free in your house, up to 4 of them. And during our peak hours of 2 to 7, you receive price signals from us anywhere from 9 cents to 46 cents in a critical peak period. And your thermostat's pre-programmed as however the customer wants to respond according to the price signal. And we started 2 years ago. Our goal is 40,000 to get 40,000 enrolled a year. Second year, we're on our target, 80,000 customers. We've probably saved 70 megawatts of peak demand the first year, about 126 the second year. And that's our main driver to be able to remove over 350 megawatts of peak demand. So what the other thing about that is our customers love this program. And what we've seen important in terms of relevance of the grid, our customer satisfaction has never been higher as a company. And just as important, we measure a metric, which are complaints to the Regulatory Commission, because people do call and complain. And the complaints to the Commission are down by half. And again, we'll be able to, remotely connect people before they move in. There's a lot of things that we've been able to do with the technology, and I think a lot of that has to do with this program. And the fact that we demonstrated through our lawsuits, we're trying to protect them from higher costs. I'm really excited about that program and the implications for how our customers are viewing us. We're reworking our processes, as I mentioned, and we've got to drive out productivity. Again, when I talked about those challenges of lowering cost and increasing quality, I think the technology and what we call data to value is a key part of that. When we think about our grid, we think about a power delivery system, and I think we're thinking about, well, no, that's really not a power delivery system. We need to think about it as a system for integrating customer devices and optimizing those devices for our on-premises, on customer systems, as well as integrate and optimize that as it interacts with our system. So bottom line, better value, more options, and better service. With our goal is to keep our prices flat, try to keep them flat in real terms. We think if we can do that, we'll keep the grid relevant for the foreseeable future, which is really important to us. I want to just close with this slide. It's called the New Enterprise Agenda, and it's by Dr. Hammer from MIT, who was really a leader in business process improvement and what new leadership has to do in this world that we're in going forward to be successful. And I really thought it captured the essence of what I've been talking about well. This is from 2004, and I've had it in my office, taped to the wall since then. And I think we talk about strategic redefinition. Are we really about delivering electricity and growing electricity? And you look at it's what I do, not what I say. Well, look at what we're doing as an industry and I'm doing as a company. I don't think that is our mission anymore. So what is our strategy? We have to redefine that, which means operational innovation aligned with that new strategy. And then second, aligning that operational innovation with the regulatory model. Mastering technology is going to be important. Management systems reinvention also is required. Organizational structure, metrics, getting rid of silos, if that sounds familiar, being able to exploit the data, organizational re-education from person in the field up to my office, and that doesn't include just our organization, but regulatory and all the key stakeholders that are involved in the regulatory process. When we talked about in 2007 that we were going to try to avoid building power plant till 2020, I can tell you there was internal, especially in our power generation area, you can imagine quite a lot of pushback because they had been always geared towards growing load growth and building power plants. So it's the cultural transformation is extremely important. It takes years. We've been on it for at least 6 or 7 years, but it takes a long time, but it's critically important to success going forward. Cross-functional teamwork, challenging why we do things, take risks, and think of customers and not ratepayers. What I like about this, it says some must do all must do some, but nobody does it just once. And when I think about our position as an industry, as a company, I think we must do it all. And that's what I refer to all being, we need to rethink our business model, we need to rethink our regulatory model, and we need to rethink our customer model. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. You'll be hearing much more from Pete later on in the program during our Q&A session. Before we meet our next keynote speaker, I'd like to spend some time talking about a very special organization that is doing a lot of good. The Blue Star Mothers of America is a nonpartisan group of mothers, fathers, and family members of military personnel. It was formed during World War II, and it's designed to serve as a support group for veterans and their family members. Blue Star Mothers is made up of local chapters throughout the U.S. and abroad. They do so many great things. In addition to providing emotional support to its members, they help unite family members with sons and daughters serving overseas. They volunteer in hospitals. They help with both emotional and physical rehab. They help with medical supplies. They help provide transportation, food, and clothing. They provide friendship, they provide gratitude, and they provide love. It's a very important organization that needs our support. That is why Penwell has established the Wall of Honor. We display the Wall of Honor at many of our events, including CoalGen, PowerGen International, and Hydrovision International. The wall pays tribute to our military personnel around the world. The wall displays the branch, the company, and the name of each person honored. And the wall is growing. More names are added every day. And so here's the connection. The wall is sponsored, and all sponsorship proceeds are given to the Blue Star Mothers of America. So I hope you'll take some time this week and take a look at the Wall of Honor. It's on display on the exhibit floor in aisle 5100. It's real easy to add a name to the wall, and I hope you and your company will consider sponsoring this great cause. Well, our next keynote speaker is David Dunning. Mr. Dunning is Fluor Corporation's Group President for Business Development and Strategy, where he leads the company's global sales, marketing, communications, government relations, and corporate for all of the company's business groups. Mr. Dunning also served as president of Fluor's Power Group, where he was responsible for the company's activities in the global nuclear generation, renewables, power services, plant betterment, and fossil-fueled industries. He has more than 39 years of direct global industry experience, including 36 years of service with Fluor. He has held several leadership positions at Fluor, including Senior Vice President of Sales, Marketing, and Strategic Marketing for the company's global power business. He also served 10 years on project assignments in nuclear power. Please put your hands together for Mr. David Dunning. Nice music.
That's great music right there. Russell will probably tell me the connection later on that. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, especially on a 25th anniversary. This is a business segment I've had a lot of passion for a lot of years, as you heard. It's been a great business. We've seen many cycles in this business. So what I want to talk to you today about is the future state of power generation. I'm not going to focus on conservation or smart grid or smart metering. That's better left to the experts. What I'd like to talk to you about is actual generation, and no mistaking the fact that it has been tough in this business. It's probably going to be tough for the next couple of years. So what can we do, though? And I'd like to go around the globe a little bit, starting with some of the drivers and then touch on North America, the international marketplace, some of the potential issues that we're going to have to face and solve for this business segment. And then finally, what can we do about it as a company like Fluor and companies like you represent in this business segment? Most of my comments are going to be through the engineering, procurement, fabrication, and construction filter. So with that, let's get started. Interesting slide here. We talk about business drivers and what causes us to be able to do new generation. Well, there's a lot of answers to it, but this perhaps is the elephant in the room. This is an area that requires some focus. We have 7.28 billion people on the planet. And by 2040, we expect to have in the neighborhood of 9 billion people. That's over a 25% increase over this next 3 decades. And if you look at the point made there, 75% of the world's population is going to be in Asia Pacific and Africa by 2040. And after 2030, the largest growing segment is India. What about the demographics, though? This is important if you like factoids, here's one. Global rural population has, for the first time ever, been in decline. If you look at the chart to the right, you'll see, and you can pick out about where we are there, we're clearly at an inflection point where urbanization has taken over rural population. And that's important for a lot of reasons. It's important because as people move more to the cities, it signifies more prosperity for them. That signifies very probably a larger middle class of consumers, and thus more energy consumption. Currently, there's 1.2 billion people around the globe that don't have electricity of any kind. So that's a concern. And finally, when you talk about growth, you need to talk about the factors that relate to it. Certainly capital, and we all have been through this industry post-2008 when we had an economic collapse, if you will, globally. So there is capital out there. There is debt and equity for projects that are good projects. Labor is going to be an issue. I'll talk about that a little bit more specific to the areas, but labor is a concern. Technology, we have great technology companies, and we're always looking for that next step change as it regards technology and how to get us to the next level. And finally, legislation, not something that we've been overly blessed with in the US, perhaps, and it makes it difficult for owners in this regard. So let's look at the state of the industry in North America. It's no shock to anybody, and you heard Russell say it in his opening comments. We're probably not going to see many more coal plants in the US, at least for the near term. However, when you flip that switch, if you look at the chart, it's predominantly coal, over 40% still. And something has to take its place. If you look at the generation mix in the US market, many of these coal plants are 40 years old, 50 years old, and somewhat less efficient than they once were. So what steps up? Well, the default is obviously gas. If any of you remember the last wave in the United States, it was roughly between 1999 and 2003 when it was an independent power market, and we built a lot of gas, over 125,000 megawatts at that time, predominantly through one technology. Well, we have a very good chance that the plants that are coming about for spot generation to take care of some retirements that are happening will likely be gas. It's a low-cost fuel at the time. You can get a permit, even a GHG permit, and the schedules are shorter. And today's technology, there are multiple participants, very proven with higher efficiencies. So it's a very functional marketplace and run as baseload in many cases. I spoke just a little bit ago about the absence of environmental regulation. It's now you see it, now you don't in many cases. You know, we love acronyms. We had CSAPR, and then we didn't have CSAPR. And we have MATS now, and you heard Pete talk about Hayes rules. Well, it's very difficult if you're an owner to make CapEx decisions that are going to carry some 30, 40 years in the future based on based on environmental regulation that's somewhat fleeting. PV, that's an interesting segment in our marketplace in North America. About 2009, when I was running power at Fluor, we created a business line for renewables and focused on concentrated solar power. We thought we had figured that out, being a company that likes thermal plays, but somewhere along the way, PV panel pricing got very aggressive, and so now we're building a lot of photovoltaic and very large in 125 to 175 megawatt range. And finally, nuclear projects. I know it's a great debate around the globe, and certainly in the US, where we started with a wave of 4 projects, and now we have a wave of 2, plus finishing one at TVA. So we need to look forward to how this fuel, which is a non-carbon fuel and a good baseload fuel, competes in this mix. And the potential for small modular reactor viability in the 2023 timeframe. State of the industry international. Little different mix. I say here all roads lead to the UK. I think it's fair to say that the UK has probably done a better job of regulation in the nuclear arena than most. I was in the UK 2 weeks ago and met with a lot of government officials, and they told me that's true, so who am I to dispute it? But we've seen with the events of Fukushima Daiichi plants a reinspection of all nuclear plants around the globe. Surely nobody plans for something like that, and I, for one, happen to think the technology held up pretty well. You know, I don't think 50 years ago they were designing for a 48-foot tsunami, but it's an impact, again, in that marketplace, and one in which caused several folks to reevaluate what they were doing. We certainly saw that Germany is doing that with their nuclear fleet. Japan, very probably, depending on who's in political power. But we do see some reaction to it, obviously. The thing with gas, internationally, it's not a globally traded commodity. It depends on infrastructure. It's not like copper or iron ore. So we do see it in many locations, but it's not necessarily the universal or default answer for every location. And then there are talk here about unconventional oil and gas technologies. You all know that as fracking or horizontal drilling, and we're seeing that offshore in various locations, which I'll talk about in just a minute with labor. Coal still dominates, though, as a baseload fuel around the globe and in that 40% mark. And it is right to build renewables. They are expensive. There are stimulus for that. But it is the right thing to do because of the breadth of diversity in fuels that we need to have. But if we continue on our pace and build 5x the amount of renewables we're building now, it doesn't really move the needle a whole lot out in 2040. That'll still be 4 to 5% of the total world energy. So what do we have to overcome? Well, a lot, really. It's not fun to be in a market where you're constantly waiting. Uncertainties are around the political side, certainly economical decisions that need to be made, and regulatory, as I mentioned before. But we have to have that urge to resist the single fuel source. I was having a discussion earlier back here behind the curtain that in 1999 to 2003, when we built all of those megawatts that I mentioned, we really moved the U.S. needle about 3 to 4% in terms of gas total dispatchability relative to coal. So it takes quite a lot to change the mix. And we have to be very focused on a broad mix. Workforce. This is not necessarily a recent phenomenon. And I'll be careful not to err in case any of you out here are HR. But we have a very experienced workforce out there. And we saw mainly 3 to 4 years ago a great regard for growing east. And that's still there, it's still present. But now we're seeing a phenomenon where people are coming back to the U.S., primarily in the Gulf Coast, and you know that's a result of the fracking phenomenon that's going on because it's keeping gas prices low. It's also keeping supply high. And so what you see when gas in Europe is $13 or $14 a million BTU, and in Asia or Japan is $18 a million BTU, you'll see a lot of opportunity out there in the oil and gas segment to monetize that cheap gas and send it offshore to compete. somebody has to build those. And so there's companies like ours and those that you represent out there that hope for the opportunity to do that. Well, our predictions are it could be anywhere between 18 and 22,000 craft that will be required for the number of projects anticipated in that marketplace in the Gulf Coast. All of those don't currently exist, so there's a lot of work we have to do in terms of training, shadowing, talking at various levels, probably levels lower than we ever had before in terms of school, to make sure that we're ready for that marketplace. Global supply chain is another interesting opportunity, and we have to be smart about how we leverage that. I know at Fluor we spend on average of $20 billion a year. Well, we need good partners in that business to bring those to the owners such that pricing is competitive, quality is high, and to make sure we're not depleting the supply and the sub-supply chain in the process. And finally, reliable electric supply. This is one that you just heard from Pete, and Jim will be out here in a little bit. These guys have it tough. They have to serve the ratepayers. They have an obligation to serve, and they have to do it many times with their hands tied behind their back. We know that we don't get to play until something is spent. So it's a very difficult business we're in right now with 1.1% growth, but that reliable electric supply still has to be delivered, and without transients. So what can we do to help the mission? Well, I think we can do a lot. You see on the top side there, a lot of you are familiar with this and do the same in this marketplace, and that's build modules. And there's a lot of fabrication yards that are very capable out there around the globe. And providing modules like this does a number of things. One, it creates something that size in a controlled environment. It's in opposition to stick building that on site, which then helps your safety record, as our folks like to say. When you bring a module like this, you build it low. You're not swinging cranes and having people up higher than they had been since they were 25. So it's a very instructive thing for our projects. This labor constraint solution, we have to get a handle on this, and training's going to be huge. Not that long ago, we saw a push that all of our kids were heading toward finance school. Well, it's interesting as we go out and about and we talk to universities now, and we talk to Job Corps, and we talk to other educational institutions, and when they ask, well, how well can I do in this business? And when you can relate that even the craft, let alone staff, can pull down six figures in an industry, that's not what it was 5 years ago. So there is a different purview we're having to put on this market, and it is quite a intensive market. It's a great legacy to build things and to leave things. Risk, always an issue. It's a four-letter word, but risk isn't that hard if you approach it from the perspective of teaming with the owners to sort it out. And if you take the approach that any risk in a project, no matter how many there are, should best be left with the person that can mitigate it. As long as you get that part of it right, then it's not just throwing money at risk as a mitigator. You can do it through contractual means. You can do it through a lot of different approaches. But it's very important that we get the risk of these projects and become aware of them. And we get that right. And then we have to partner with owners early in the process. There's two things we can do. One, they have to deliver price certainty to their rate-based constituents. We can help do that, but we have to get the scope and the price unified at the onset to make sure we're doing it properly and not frivolously. And one of the biggest things that needs to happen at the tail end of that process is that we're still standing. It does an owner no good if we come in and take a low price and 3 years later we're not there to cover his needs after the project is done. That's not a very healthy scenario. Finally, I want to leave you with this. If you look around each of those pictures, this is really a good formula for success. It covers a lot of things. And we know that each and every owner can't have all of these, but we have to keep focused on the fact that a diversified fuel mix is a way to combat a lot of issues. It's a way to spread the cost so that you don't end up with one particular fuel that may not be in the best advantage of either ratepayers or shareholders. And when you look at this and you look at the general mix, considering urbanization and all that's happening and this eventual need that we're going to have and have to supply, we have a good owner group out there, very talented, ready to make decisions. We just need to equip them, and they're going to have to deal with the retirement of a lot of the older assets because many of them have been extended as far as they can be. We have great technology companies in this business, and they're continuing to make strides to take the next step change. And we have a good cadre, I believe, of EPC O&M companies that are in it for the long haul and are trying to make good decisions and be good stewards of the CapEx that is invested in them. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave, for that presentation. Some great information on where the market is for EPC firms today. Let's go ahead and meet our next keynote speaker is Amy Erickson. Earlier this year, Ms. Erickson was named president of Alstom US. She leads the company's engagement with policy stakeholders in the U.S. and its pursuit of new business opportunities in thermal and renewable power generation and transmission and distribution. Before being named president of the company's U.S. operations, she was in charge of product and platform development for Alstom's gas turbine and plant portfolio. She has more than 20 years' experience in the international energy industry and has held high-ranking positions at DuPont, ExxonMobil, and ABB and Alstom. She earned a chemical engineering degree from Pennsylvania State University and an MBA from Harvard. Everyone, please help me welcome Amy Erickson. Thank you.
I don't know who picked this music. I did not make that selection. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to thank Russell and his team for inviting me to share a few thoughts on planning for the future from the perspective of a technology supplier, a global technology supplier. So previously, we heard Peter explain how one word, uncertainty, is impacting his business. Uncertainty is certainly not new in our industry, and instead it seems like it's becoming the new norm. When I talk to utility execs about uncertainty, they speak about uncertainty in terms of demand for electricity, new regulations, and electricity market rules. These uncertainties have one universal effect. They make it extremely difficult to invest confidently in large-scale energy projects. So uncertainty leads to more specific questions in our industry. Do we invest in new generation or in the grid? Should I install scrubbers on my plant or retire it? Is it better to build a simple cycle or a combined cycle gas plant? These sorts of questions anchor our attention in the here and now. And these decisions are far from easy, but as hard as they may be, we may face even harder ones tomorrow. Warren Buffett said that someone is sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. And his point that is forethought today is the key to prosperity tomorrow. And so now's the time to decide what tools should we help shape America's long-term energy strategy. Basically, we need to know what kind of trees to plant and where to plant them. So as we approach these critically important decisions, I thought I would structure my comments this morning around 3 simple recommendations. The first is learn from the rest of the world. And I want to make this disclaimer. This is not US bashing, and it's not saying that everyone else in the rest of the world is doing it right. I'm looking for positive examples. I just had this discussion backstage. The second is invest in the grid. And the third is keep all our generating options on the table. So, on that first recommendation, learning from the rest of the world, I'd like to start in the UK, which has established a program focused on driving clean coal technology to commercialization. That program is intended to make carbon capture cost competitive by the 2020s through public support and public and private partnerships. After carefully evaluating proposals from 8 industry teams, the UK recently announced its intent to move forward with the White Rose project, a fully funded, commercial-scale clean coal demonstration based on oxy-fired carbon capture technology. So when it comes online, White Rose will be the world's first zero-emissions fossil-fired power plant. And I want to point out that the oxy-firing technology being deployed at White Rose was actually developed here in the US, but it's being driven towards commercial viability overseas, where we are seeing how fully funded technology demonstration projects can deliver on the promise of an all-above energy strategy. So now to France. France is working to rebalance its energy portfolio and install 6 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2020. France recognized the opportunity to achieve its clean energy target and seize leadership in a next-generation energy technology, just as it once did very effectively with nuclear. It structured those projects to provide a sufficient scale and volume to establish an entirely new industry. The first tender was for 3 wind farms, which included 240 turbines with a combined output of nearly 1.4 gigawatts. It also included the deployment of advanced offshore grid technologies. This has resulted in 4 new factories, 5,000 new jobs, and work for 200 supplier companies, one of which is the one I work for. So as we look ahead to developing new US energy projects as part of a clean economy, let's not make small plans. And finally, in terms of learning from the rest of the world, I'd like to go to Asia, where, like here in the US, utilities are retiring older and less efficient fossil-fired plants. The difference is that those plants are being replaced by a fleet of state-of-the-art facilities which are built around ultra-supercritical boilers. So as a result, Asia now boasts the world's most efficient coal-fired fleet. And this is thanks to the evolution of materials for high-temperature and high-pressure steam cycles, such as the ones that DOE and EPRI and Alstom and many of you in this room have been advancing. Ultra-supercritical power plants are 25% more efficient than older units. And in fact, according to the IEA, 2 years' worth of CO2 emissions could have been avoided had all new coal plants in the last 50 years been built using the most efficient technology available at the time. So no matter the fuel, buying state-of-the-art always is a better choice for the long term. These 3 examples highlight the importance of looking to the rest of the world for best practices and some insights that could, maybe, be a part of America's ongoing energy dialogue. And so next I'd like to move to the grid. And this will echo much of what we've already heard from Peter just a few moments ago. One of the most significant favors that we can do ourselves to better plan for the future is to ensure that we're building that future on a very stable foundation. And the power grid is indeed that foundation. But we need to invest in a bit of shoring up. Changing load profiles, intermittent renewables, and a growing portfolio of distributed energy sources from car batteries to energy storage devices to rooftop solar panels. They demand a power grid that is smarter, more flexible, and stronger. A recent string of high-profile, prolonged power outages spanning multiple states has underscored the need to make our investment in the power grid more resilient and the grid more resilient. One way to do that is by giving the men and women who are in the operating rooms for the grid better real-time insight into its condition and into fast-moving issues that are capable of causing widespread outages. Today in California, New England, and the Midwest, our transmission and distribution experts are helping customers deploy a new generation of wide-area grid monitoring technology using synchrophasor data. So these systems collect real-time information on the health of the grid and deliver it back to the control room at speeds that are hundreds of times faster than current monitoring technology. So this inflow of data gets transformed into actionable information and gives the grid operators the ability to identify disruptions in their network or in neighboring networks and insulate their section of the grid from cascading problems. So we are deploying technology to protect the grid against widespread outages. But the other question is, what can we do to improve restoration times after the lights have gone out? One of the promised benefits of Smart Grid, if you'll remember, was the ability for a damaged power grid to heal itself and restore service in a fraction of time, and that is becoming a reality today. Alabama Power will soon flip the switch on America's first fully integrated distribution management system. This advanced software for utility operating centers combines distribution and outage management into a single application. And it helps grid operators make faster and more informed decisions both during day-to-day operations as well as during critical outages. It will actually quickly pinpoint and suggest options for rerouting the flow of power around a fault, meaning that a grid operator, in some cases, maybe not always, can restore service without dispatching a crew. Power can be restored within seconds, and automated fault location cuts customer outage times by up to 30%. So we often talk about the smart grid as a concept for the future, but in many respects, the grid is becoming smarter with each passing day. And our teams are seeing that transition firsthand on these projects and others that are like it. Sophisticated control room upgrades are giving utilities and regional operators greater flexibility to call on distributed energy resources to balance supply and demand for electricity. Advanced power electronics, from HVDC converters to static VAR compensators, are cutting line losses, improving power quality, and reducing instabilities. And new innovations, and they will keep coming, in these areas, such as voltage source conversion, promise to make the grid even more resilient by optimizing network interconnections and the integration of renewable energy resources. So this brings us to my final recommendation on planning for the future. It's a simple one. In fact, I saw that Dave had a slide similar to this in his previous presentation. And it can be expressed in any number of cliches. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket, use all the tools in the shed, or the one that we hear from Washington right now, an all of the above energy strategy. But no matter how you phrase it, the point is simple. In an uncertain future, we must keep all options on the table when it comes to deciding what mix of resources should be used to meet the world's growing energy needs. Now, we're in a country right now that's blessed with a rich mix of natural resources, but we cannot afford to abandon any one energy source based on short-term considerations. In fact, in terms of learning from the rest of the world, here's one from the other side of the ledger. In parts of Europe, such a move away from nuclear power has resulted in a 2% rise in carbon emissions. It's destabilized the regional power markets, and it's actually driven up the price consumers pay for electricity. So we believe in a balanced portfolio of energy sources. And it's especially true here in the United States, where energy has always been and will always be a regional discussion shaped by the abundance or absence of energy sources in any different part of our country. So the first step towards preserving that balance is to acknowledge and invest in a very precious resource that we already have, and that's our existing fleet of power plants. We know that courtesy of the EIA, 65% of today's installed gas generating capacity and 85% of today's installed coal and nuclear capacity will continue operating at least through 2040. So this underscores ever more the need to make today's fleet as efficient, as clean, and as reliable as possible. Minnesota Power, for example, is deploying a next-generation emission control system at its Boswell 4 station. This is a single modular system that will control multiple pollutants and provide full compliance. It will cut mercury emissions by 90%. It'll bring down sulfur dioxide emissions, as well as those of other substances like heavy metals. In the end, it offers customers greater flexibility to control multiple pollutants with a single piece of equipment, a piece of equipment that is easily adapted to the physical constraints of existing plants. So projects like these are critical in securing our ability to rely on a domestic energy resource of which America boasts a 200-year supply. In Virginia, Dominion has tapped into a new potential on its existing nuclear fleet. The company has recently upgraded the steam turbine generators at its North Anna and Surrey power stations with the latest advancements in blade design and manufacturing. The investment added about 240 megawatts of zero-carbon electricity to the local grid. And 240 megawatts in the grand scheme of things doesn't sound like a lot. But to put it in perspective, since 1977, projects like this, coupled with performance improvements, have added enough new power on the grid to account for about nearly 27 new nuclear reactors. This is exactly the sort of energy investment that is providing new opportunities for America's workforce. These turbine retrofits were performed. I'm going to get to the right slide now. They're performed at our Richmond, Virginia workshop, which is just down the road from the two power plants. And as have other equipment providers, Alstom has invested in our US facilities, modernizing their capabilities and enhancing our ability to execute projects close to the customer. And there is a side benefit to investing in the installed base. It provides time, the time needed for the new generation of energy technologies to mature and come down the cost curve. So I want to touch on a couple of these new generations. There are innovations like chemical looping, which is an advanced oxy-combustion process that harnesses the energy of coal through an innovative series of reactions. Chemical looping, unlike other forms of carbon capture, utilizes a solid oxygen carrier, therefore eliminating the need for the high capital and energy-intensive air separation, while producing the same concentrated CO2 stream that oxy-combustion does. In fact, Alstom and the Department of Energy Studies have shown that chemical looping could be the option for reducing carbon emissions that has the least impact on cost of electricity. Our team in Windsor, Connecticut is actively working on this process, having built and tested the largest chemical looping demonstration unit constructed to date. The critical step to take chemical looping from this test scale to pilot scale to large scale demonstration. This is the scale demonstration that we need to be convinced of the performance parameters at full scale such that we can make commercial guarantees. And we're working to do this with the DOE, bring it to large scale demonstration. I referenced offshore wind earlier, and even with offshore wind becoming closer to commercialization, we should also keep an eye on what the ocean can power tomorrow. And the reason for advancing ocean energy technology is clear. Studies sponsored by the DOE's National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL, show that America's energy resources could produce, their ocean resources, could produce an amount of electricity equal to 1/3 of the total used in the US each year. And finally, in this day and age, and myself having worked most recently in Alstom's gas business, how could I possibly address PowerGen without touching on gas? And as we've heard before, and we all believe, gas is the game changer, especially in the US. Now, it's not like we've seen another dash to gas, but we are certainly seeing a slower and deliberate and long-term march to gas, one that's very good for our country. So when I talk to utility executives about gas, they can't say with any certainty how they're going to operate their gas plants in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. They want optionality, to use a word that Peter talked about. So for sure, our next generation gas technologies are geared for higher output and better efficiency, but it's not just about the higher firing temperatures or the increased mass flow. We're going to give the customers every last drop of flexibility they need to adapt plant operations to long-term shifts in market dynamics. And after all, that's the beauty of gas-fired power generation. It can be cost-effective in baseload or heavily cycled markets, especially in the US. So we know gas is currently the single biggest driver of our customers' energy portfolio decisions. And that's why it accounts for a larger share of Alstom's global R&D budget than any other technology. Now, there are also other energy sources that we can't lose sight of. Concentrated thermal solar power, geothermal, solar PV, and the list goes on, and that's the point. We need a broad and diverse mix of energy sources to manage uncertainty today and to hedge against its impact on tomorrow. So if planning for the future were easy, I would have a personal anecdote to put in my speech right now, but I don't. So instead, what I'd like to talk about, my clicker's not working. Thank you. So instead, what I would like to end on is in October at the World Energy Congress that was held in Korea, the energy trilemma was addressed. And this is balancing the needs for energy security, energy access, and environmental sustainability. We believe that technology suppliers have a responsibility to incorporate these objectives from first concept to operation of our products. So Alstom's job as a technology provider is to make sure that customers have the technology they need when and where they need it. It's the challenge for our 8,000 US employees and their 93,000 Alstom peers around the world, and they tackle that head on every day. Their focus is on driving down costs, maximizing the value of existing investments, and investing heavily in a broad lineup of energy technologies to make power plants and grids cleaner and smarter. We approach planning for the future with a keen focus on customers' needs and the challenges and opportunities that drive those needs, which is why we remain confident in the wisdom of seeking lessons from the rest of the world, investing in the grid, and keeping all generating options on the table. So with that, I'd like to thank Russell again, and I look forward to the rest of our discussion on stage here, as well as to the conference. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Amy. Well, it is time. As I said earlier in the program, we wanted to find out exactly who has had the biggest influence on this industry over the last 25 years. So we put together a list of people and asked the industry, we asked you, who you think was the most influential over that time. Based on that feedback, we put together another list of the top 25 people who have had the most impact on this great industry. We have already named the top 24 on the Power Engineering website, and you are about to find out who you chose as the industry's most influential person. But before we tell you who that person is, let's take another look at the top 24. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to announce your selection as this industry's most influential person. Please put your hands together for James E. Rogers, the chairman of Duke Energy. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. There you go. Thank you. We'll get a picture right quick. Right there. It's all yours.
Good morning. I am really honored to receive this recognition. I look back over my career, and when I started, I never dreamed I would get this kind of recognition. This just shows what happens when you hang out for a very long time. What I'd like to do is start our conversation. You've seen 3 great presentations, and what I'm going to try to do is put those presentations into a context of where we've been as an industry and where we're going to go in the future. I've been excited about what has happened in the past, but I think the better days are ahead, the more challenging days are ahead, and the greater opportunities are in front of us. But let me ask you to step back with me even further than 25 years ago, all the way back to 1978 in the passage of the National Energy Act. Prior to that time, all the utilities in this country were vertically integrated and regulated. The first crack in the monopoly of utilities in this country was started with PURPA, embedded in the National Energy Act. And when that was passed, people didn't think it could have such a profound impact, but it did. More than 60,000 megawatts were built of PURPA machines. And so the generation monopoly of utilities in this country, a crack was created. But over time, with deregulation in 19 states and with renewable portfolio standards in 30 states, there's been a continued erosion of the generation monopoly. That's clear. But not evenly across this country. Some states are still vertically integrated and regulated, other states are not. We have a very complex system in the United States. Those who come from outside the United States looking for uniformity across the country won't find it. And it always surprises them. I tell people doing business from state to state is like doing business internationally. Different governments, different cultures, and big differences. And those differences, coupled with the geography differences and the location of fuel, has fundamentally changed how each of those companies and states have evolved. But back to the story. The erosion of our monopoly on generation. And then we have seen the erosion of the monopoly on transmission with RTOs and ISOs. And the control over the operation of the transmission, decisions about operation and investment have now been moved to regional authorities, no longer in the hands of utility companies. And today, and I thought Pete did a wonderful job of framing the challenges we face today, but in the broader context of the utility monopoly, the reality is our distribution monopoly is being challenged. And that's the state of play. And I look back over the last 25 years, and I think about all the changes that have occurred in the industry. This erosion of generation and transmission, and now on the threshold of an erosion of our distribution monopoly. And through that period, there's been significant consolidation of investor-owned utilities. We had almost 100. Today, we have roughly 50 utilities in the country. Our company today is made up of 5 different companies 20 years ago. And today, we operate with 40% fewer people than we did 20 years ago as 5 separate companies. So we've been through this transition and this consolidation. And the consolidation has been in preparation for the even greater challenges that are in front of us. And they are great challenges that are coming. But through all this change that I've described, through all the consolidation, our industry has done, and it's a tribute to you, our industry has done a remarkable job of providing affordable, reliable, and increasingly clean electricity in a safe and sustainable ways 24/7, 365 days a year. Think about that fact. Affordability. Our prices are roughly the same today in real terms as they were 30 years ago. In terms of reliability, roughly 99.99% of the time we deliver electricity to our customers. And in terms of clean, we have really cleaned up by spending tens, hundreds of billions of dollars to reduce emissions from our coal plants in this country. And so we have come through this period, and we now stand at a place where I wish I was 25 years younger. And I had an opportunity to participate in this industry over the next several decades, because as I said at the outset, the challenges will be great. But I think the people in this industry are up to the challenge. And I think it's very important that we talk about it in plain English. What does that mean? Well, a plain English point that Pete made well is that we're an industry where we experienced 5% growth in the 60s, 2 to 3% growth in the 90s, and today we're facing a future where there'll be at best anemic growth, but in all likelihood, flat to declining demand. And that's flat and declining demand provided by the utility, with the renewable portfolio standards absorbing whatever growth that there may be in the states that have renewable portfolio standards. So the question mark is, we provided universal access in the 20th century to every home and business in this country. National Academy of Engineers said the greatest engineering achievement of the 20th century was the electrification of America. We did that. But that was yesterday. And that was a yesterday with a different regulatory model and a different business model. Today, our challenges are fundamentally different. We've done the job of the past, but now the job of the future is quite different. Dealing with this low demand is one. A second thing that we're going to have to deal with is continued aging and need to modernize, even at a faster pace than we have in the past, to modernize our generation, transmission, and distribution assets. And the good news is the new technologies that are available are remarkable. I think we're in an incredible period where as new technologies come on, I believe there will be significant productivity gains in the production of kilowatt hours from generation, transmission, distribution, and even in the use, significant productivity gains in every part of our business. But we have to have the capital to invest in these new technologies. We have to invest in our nuclear plants. As they age, they require greater capital, greater O&M. So in a world where we're facing increased cost just based on the age of our system, and more importantly, there are new technologies that will allow step changes in the operation of our facilities. That's a good thing, and that's a great opportunity. But we're not in a period where we're going to be building major central station plants. That is not in front of us. Not for the next couple decades, particularly if you factor in the RPS's contribution, if you factor in the new appliance standards, the new building codes, and all the new technologies that are helping consumers reduce their usage. So the question then becomes no growth in demand, increasing cost, and we need to, how do we recover that cost? That translates into higher prices. And higher prices are not politically acceptable year in and year out. And given the regulatory models, you have to file rate cases and negotiate your way through it to get that done. But the important thing is that is not going to be a way to allow us to grow earnings, because at the heart of every utility is the value proposition associated with returning a dividend to our investors. How can we grow a dividend with flat demand, rising cost, need to raise rates? And as you raise your rates, it creates that spiral of people saying, well, there is elasticity, and there are new technologies, and there's solar on the rooftop. All of that drives our customers to think differently. And I think one of the challenges that we have is to think differently about our customers, to be even closer to our customers than we have been in the past. Technology really allows us to do that. These are the challenges. But what must we do? What single set of things that need to be done? I think the first thing is we have to work in collaboration with all our stakeholders in each of the states we operate in to change the regulatory model. We need to move beyond the model that allowed for universal access to move to a model where the primary role of the utility would be the optimizer of the use of electricity on the grid, where the primary role of the utility will be to build a resilient grid. And that means new technologies. That means thinking about microgrids, because our threats that we face today, like cyber attack, terrorist attack, increasing number of storms, a more resilient grid is critical to our future, but that takes significant investment. And without a new regulatory model, it's going to be difficult to convince investors that we should be making significant additional investments. So sitting with our various stakeholders in the state and convincing them and joining with them and recognizing that no one of us has all the answers, but together we can find the right way forward, is going to be a key to our success, because we must, and I underscore must, change our regulatory model in each of the states that we operate to deal in this new environment where our responsibilities will be different, where there'll be solar on the rooftop that we will have to operate, where there will be more renewables on the system to maintain the same level of reliability that we have maintained in the past and our customers have grown very accustomed to. But once we change the regulatory model, that allows us to change our business model. And that puts us in a much stronger place going forward. Think about where we've been. I mean, in a sense, a way to describe where we've been is for me to share with you the story, and many of you have heard this story. If you put a frog in a boiling pot of water, he'll jump right out. But if you put a frog in a cold bucket of water and put it on the stove and turn the heat up slowly, slowly over time, you'll cook him. Now, I'm not saying the utility industry is that frog, because we've worked hard to deal with these issues every step of the way, but the reality is we've lost significant opportunities to invest in generation and transmission, and maybe in the future in our distribution, just based on the actions that have been taken over the last 25 to 35 years. So we have to think differently. And the way I like to describe it, some people say, well, in the utility industry, you're kind of reactive, you don't embrace. I say, no. I say, what we'd have to make instinctive and part of our DNA is that when we look out and we see on the horizon a problem, a challenge, an issue that challenges our ability to create wealth for our investors, we need to run to the problem. We need to run as fast as we can and embrace the problem and convert that problem to an opportunity for both our customers as well as our investors. That's a very important mindset that we have to have as we go into the next 5, 10, and 15 years to succeed. And I believe with that mindset, and with a mindset of collaboration with others, we can create a way forward that will make a difference. I believe you are going to be part of an effort to reinvent this industry, even more than it's been reinvented over the last 25 years. And the success of this industry for our customers, for our investors, is really in your hands. And I have great confidence as I look at the leadership in my own company that I'll soon be stepping down as chairman at the end of this year. I have great confidence in their ability. I know many people from different companies in this industry. I have confidence in them. I look at our suppliers and I listen to the creativity and the thoughtfulness of Alstom and Fluor. And I know we have the capability, among many other suppliers that are in this room, we have the capability to solve these problems and move forward. The key, as I've kind of said over and over, is we got to get the regulatory model right so we can get the business model right, so we can make the investments in these new technologies and transform the way we provide electricity to our customers. You know, at the end of this year, as I said, I stepped down as chairman. And as coincidence would have it, if you said, Rogers, what are you doing at the end of the year? I'd say, well, I've created the largest company in the industry. I'm number one, and I'm going to Disneyland with my grandchildren. And guess what? That's the truth. I'm actually going on a Disney cruise with 1,000 germ machines. And at the end of the day, I hope I survive it. But it can't be tougher in this industry. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But the point is, I've been proud to be part of this industry. I've been proud to work side by side by many of you and many others who have been in this industry during this time. And we have a very noble purpose. We transform the lives of millions and millions of people by providing electricity every morning. We have the unique responsibility and capability of transforming energy and environmental policy, not just for today, but for future generations. So we have a great set of responsibilities and great opportunities. And you don't really realize how important electricity is to the lives of people and to spend time, as I have, with people in Africa and South America who have no access to electricity, there's more than 1.2 billion people that have no access, then you appreciate how transforming it is and how foundational to life is what we do every day, 24/7. Thank you all for giving me the honor of being in this industry. Thank you for this recognition today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. That was great.
Thank you.
Have a seat right down there at the end. Thank you, Jim. You are a library of information. At this time, I'd like to invite the rest of the keynote panel to the stage for the Q&A portion of our keynote session.
Very well done. I like the frog.
Oh, sorry. Repeat. Get this right?
All right, before we get started, please join me in thanking the keynote panel for their time and insight. Well, this is the fun part. There are so many issues we could be talking about. It's hard to know where to start from. There is, of course, the new source performance standard for CO2. As Dave mentioned, there's MATS compliance. Utilities are dealing with regional haze. And, of course, there are workforce challenges facing the industry. Jim, I know you've been in the industry a short amount of time. You may have some experience dealing with some of these issues. As you think about these issues, what concerns you most about the future of this industry?
Well, I'm not worried about attracting great talent to our industry. I've spent a lot of time over the last several years on campuses across this country. There are young, smart people in this country that really care about energy issues, they care about environmental issues, and if they see an opportunity to shape that future, they're going to join with us. I'm not worried with respect to our ability to come together with other people with different views to build a way forward. I have confidence in our capability to do that. My number one fear is that we will not run to the problems of the future and the present, that we will be reactive. And at the end of the day, nobody succeeds and creates value for either the investor or for the customer if you're running from the problems or waiting for the problems to show up in front of you. Mm-hmm. You got to go get them. And my fear is we won't go get them.
Mm-hmm. You've helped build the largest electric utility in the nation. As you prepare to step down at the end of this year, how do you feel about Duke Energy's place? How is it positioned? Is it positioned for success?
I think that Duke is in a very strong position because we have diversity of jurisdictions. We're in 6 different jurisdictions. Only one of those jurisdictions has gone through deregulation of generation, so they are vertically integrated, regulated jurisdictions. And those are the only jurisdictions where you'll see the building of new nuclear, the building of new coal in the future, and the building of even natural gas, because the great challenge that faces our industry and the competitive markets aren't prepared for it. They don't have capacity markets. The greatest single challenge is that we're going to have to retire and replace every nuclear plant by 2050, every one of those old coal plants by 2050, and we're going to have to raise significant amounts of capital in order to rebuild that infrastructure. That is not going to happen in competitive markets the way they're currently structured. It will happen in the regulated markets, and I like our position being in regulated markets to build that generation.
One of the biggest topics, one of the biggest issues facing our industry today is, of course, the new GHG standards for coal plants. The EPA claims that the standard 1,100 pounds per megawatt hour is justifiable. It's based on CCS technology. They say that this is a technology that has been adequately demonstrated. Amy, what do you think? Is this a technology that meets that legal threshold? Has it been adequately demonstrated in your mind?
As it stands right now, no. We have 13 test projects, pilots, one large-scale demonstration. One thing I can say is that the tests and the pilots have proven that carbon capture technically can happen. We can remove 90% of CO2 at very strong purity levels. But as I said before, without moving to larger, full-scale demonstration to get the confidence in our ability to commercially guarantee, it can't be considered commercial. And there are projects like that moving on around the globe. So it will reach commercial viability. It's just a matter of when.
I see. I see. Pete, do you have any thoughts about the legal threshold here? Is this something that, obviously there's going to be litigation over this standard? Is this something that you think will stand up in court?
Probably the wrong guy to talk to. One, I'm not a lawyer, and two, we just lost our case. I know it's hard to say. I mean, Jim is a lawyer, by the way, so maybe he's to pick up that one. But what we saw in the 10th Circuit Court really depends on who the judges are.
Yeah.
In our case, the EPA and their consultant that they paid $25,000 to, versus our $1 million we paid on our site-specific finding recommended scrubbers that are half the cost we think they are, and they don't even fit. But that didn't seem to be an issue for the court, that the scrubbers technically don't even work on our units.
Yeah.
So given the type of decisions we saw out of that, you can get anything out of the judicial system, it would seem. So I wouldn't take a lot of comfort in the courts are going to come to a rescue here.
Jim, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I've long had the view that we need to address the issue of carbon in this country, and the appropriate place to do that is in Congress. Congress has got the tools, they got the ability to either build cap and trade systems or look at other types of approaches to putting a price on carbon. And quite frankly, it's difficult for me to envision, if we don't have commercially available technology, how any regulatory agency can require us to build that. And then I ask the question, how much money is our government putting into CCS compared to other things that they're putting their money into? And it's not clear to me that they believe that's an option or they'd be putting more money in it.
Dave, you mentioned obviously there's not much of activity in terms of new coal projects. We were expecting the dash for gas. That hasn't happened. The construction of new gas projects has been significantly lower than expected. Where is the market for EPC firms? What is it that is holding back the construction of new gas-fired generation?
Well, I think Jim stated it very well. It's the fact that there's not a lot of need within any generation system, especially in the U.S., for just new bulk generation. When you have a decline in the reserve margin, which they have to preserve for adequate reliability, then, or if there's an older gas plant or a coal plant that gets retired, we're putting it in. Some of the unregulated are looking for opportunity in that market. So as long as we have gas prices where they are, it will continue to make sense and be the way to go. But again, you look at the past to sometimes predict the future.
Yeah.
We did this once before when gas was low, and by the time we put a reasonable amount of demand on it, we find out then gas becomes $12.
Exactly. Exactly. We never
so
thought
it should be
would,
diversified.
We never thought it would go to $12, and when it did, we never thought it would go back to to $3. So do you have any thoughts about that? Is gas at a level? Is it going to stay at this level long term? Have you done any studies, research on the forecast of gas prices?
Yeah, I think it'll stay in this neighborhood for a while. I think about a year and a half ago it was down in the $2 and something a million BTU. Now we're a bit higher than that, obviously. But yeah, I think as long as there are no unintended consequences around fracking, and we hear a lot about that.
Yeah.
We have an opportunity to keep the gas price reasonably stable.
Yeah.
This issue of the Gulf Coast that I mentioned is going to put a little pressure on that gas. And whether it's gas to liquids or LNG, there's going to be a lot of interest in monetizing it. So that'll put some pressure on the price point as well.
Pete, your company has a great story to tell in terms of efficiency. You have managed to actually avoid the construction of new generations through efficiency programs, specifically demand response technology and programs. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I talked about our Smart Hours program and during the speech, and that's been widely successful in terms of it. And we went into this early on, and not as we really, as a principal, said that it has to be a voluntary participation, not mandated, not controlling any of the customer's devices, because it really need to be a re-education. They can get on, look at their hourly usage, and of course, if they sign in Smart Hours, they get the price signal sent to their communicating thermostats. And what we've just seen is, even if they don't have the communicating thermostats and get the price signals, they're so much more aware of how they use their energy and electricity that they're changing. They change their behaviors. I mean, there's all sorts of different behaviors you're seeing when you're giving them the price signals, and that's leading to a lot of customer satisfaction, much higher customer satisfaction as well as efficiency. So it's been the customers love it, and so we like it because it's achieving our goals. That's a partnership. We approach it as a partnership and engaging our customers up front when we started this whole effort of with the smart meters. So it's been very successful in our opinion.
Pete and Jim, I think both of you mentioned a need to change the business model. And as all of us know, more homes and businesses are producing their own power. And so there has been a tremendous growth in distributed solar. And this growth is expected to continue. And so this shift is to more distributed generation is cutting into utilities' profits. It's impacting the ability to pay for the upkeep of distribution and generation assets. And I get the sense that the industry doesn't know which way to go on this. What do you think? Is it time to embrace this? Or is it time to fight to preserve the model that the utility industry has been operating under for so long?
I think, first of all, when you think of our challenges of having to retire and replace our fleet, you think of the challenges of creating a more resilient grid and the billions of dollars that we have to invest to do that. We need a regulatory model that works, and one that works is formula rates. Because formula rates assures us recovery of our fixed cost, allows us to focus on optimizing the use of electricity on our system where we have multiple providers, unlike in the past, and an increased number of Nest thermostats as an example of new technologies associated with productivity gains in the use of electricity. So I'm one that believes that formula rates is the right way forward. It sends a positive signal to the investment community. It allows us to raise the billions of dollars and to confidently invest it in making the grid more resilient so these new technologies can actually be deployed. So I think we should facilitate it. The other last thing I would say is we ought to be in that business. And in fact, in North Carolina, 3 or 4 years ago, we went to the commission and got permission to put 10 megawatts on the rooftop. We told them we thought it'd cost $50 million to do it. It only cost us 42 because the prices have come down because primarily oversupply, but the technology is driving the price down. But the reality is we should be in the business. And as well as we need formula rates to really allow us to meet the challenges of the future, which are a huge capital investment to modernize our grid.
Pete, what do you think? Do regulators need to step in to adapt the business model?
Well, I think the industry does know where to go on this. And one, because we talk a lot about it, our last CEO meeting, it was, it goes to pricing our services appropriately and reflecting, should I have a degree in economics, we think about, letting the market allocate resources efficiently.
Yep.
And when you get into subsidization, in this case, you're subsidizing low-income people or subsidizing those who have the amount of money to invest and put these distributed generation devices in their premises. And so I think that we need the subsidies to be transparent what they are, and then you can make the right decisions. But right now, capital is being allocated inefficiently with subsidies. And you can mention everything's got subsidies, but that is a big problem, and we don't have that problem, and we are. So I'm talking about what we're observing, but. As I said, we'd like to go to, and I think about the banking industry. Remember free checking?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens when you bundle, it changes things dramatically. And if that's the way we want to go, it seems like that's what we need to do. If people are going to use our system differently and we're going to be an integrator and optimizer, we have to offer these ancillary services at the distribution level.
Yeah. I'm afraid we're running out of time. Let me end it with this one last question. The growth of wind power capacity obviously has slowed, but there is a lot of interest, as we've mentioned, in rooftop solar, but not much in utility scale solar. How would you describe the growth of renewable power in coming years? Amy, you mind if I start with you on that?
Well, I think here in the U.S., obviously, the near term is going to be renewables and gas. We do have portfolio standards that we're still trying to meet. The large-scale utility renewables, clearly there are economics around those that could be very attractive. And this is why we're going offshore on wind. You have better energy intensity and an overall stronger COE proposition. It's the same with utility scale solar. It's a matter of getting the technology there, getting the efficiency you want in the conversion, and again, bringing it down the cost curve. But clearly, we don't have many options outside of gas and renewable in the near term. So this is where you're going to see the energy go.
Dave, what are your clients telling you about the prospects of new wind and solar?
In terms of solar, we watch the international market in Spain and Germany and elsewhere with the mid-tariffs, and then in 2009 to 10 brought that technology to the U.S. We see it predominantly in 4 states out west. A couple of concentrated solar power units were taken on, which have a thermal play in them. But then, as was mentioned many times, the price point on PV panels up to 300 watt really fell. And it was an issue I think everybody deals with. But at the same time, we're in the process of building 2 right now, one at 125 megawatts. And this is far from rooftop, and one at 175 megawatts. So the footprint, 1,600 acres of solar panels tracking the sun. You still have some in development. They are subsidized, obviously, or cash grant based. So I think the window, though, is getting narrow because of the 2016 timeframe on that. So.
Well, I wish we had more time to talk about this. We can certainly carry on the conversation backstage. I personally have learned a lot in the last 2 hours. I hope you have too. Before we adjourn, let's thank our keynote panel one more time for their time and insight. We are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. You bet.
Fun to be on the panel with you, Amy. Thank you, Pete. Nice.